The calm Caribbean was shattered on December 20, 2025, when the U.S. Coast Guard, backed by the Department of Defense, seized the oil tanker Centuries in international waters. This wasn't a routine stop. The Centuries, flying Panama's flag and loaded with Venezuelan crude bound for China, was far from U.S. territory. The operation marked the third such seizure in 2 weeks, signaling a sharp escalation in U.S.-Venezuela tensions. Unlike previous seizures, the Centuries wasn't on any sanctions list, making this a bold new step in U.S. policy. Coast Guard teams boarded swiftly, detaining the crew as Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem declared the U.S. would not tolerate oil-funding narco-terrorism. Venezuela accused the U.S. of forced disappearance, adding a human dimension to the standoff. The timing was no accident. Just days after President Trump announced a total and complete blockade of Venezuela, the Century's seizure was the first real test of that policy, turning rhetoric into action. With U.S. military assets, including an aircraft carrier, now in the region, the message is clear. The U.S. is ready to enforce its will at sea. The Caribbean has become the front line of a new campaign. This single act has sent shockwaves through global markets and diplomacy. The world is left wondering, how far will the U.S. go? And what will Venezuela and its allies do next? The stakes have never been higher. The U.S. Coast Guard's actions are part of a broader strategy to choke off Venezuela's main source of income, oil. The Trump administration refuses to recognize Nicolás Maduro as Venezuela's leader, using sanctions for years to try to force him out. Now the White House is taking direct action, physically stopping oil shipments. The goal: cut off the cash that keeps Maduro's government afloat. Trump's total and complete blockade aims to starve the regime of funds and force political change. The U.S. has labeled Maduro's government a foreign terrorist organization, linking it to fentanyl smuggling and the opioid crisis. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth insists the blockade will continue until Venezuela returns seized American assets. By intercepting oil tankers, the U.S. is reclaiming what it says was stolen from American companies. This is now an economic war over resources, not just a diplomatic standoff. Years of sanctions failed to topple Maduro, who's propped up by Russia, China, and Iran. The U.S. is betting that direct, forceful action will finally break the deadlock, but it's a high-stakes gamble. The administration believes economic strangulation will bring change. The world is watching to see if this new approach succeeds or backfires. The outcome could reshape the region's future. The U.S. justifies its seizures by targeting the so-called shadow fleet, old ships moving oil for sanctioned states like Venezuela and Iran. These vessels often hide their activities, turning off tracking, falsifying documents, and transferring cargo at sea. Many lack insurance and proper safety standards, making them environmental and economic risks. The U.S. claims the Centuries was part of this shadow fleet, even though it wasn't on a sanctions list. By targeting these ships, the U.S. argues it's enforcing maritime safety, not just sanctions. This expands the number of potential targets and creates uncertainty for global shipping. Any ship trading with Venezuela risks being labeled shadow fleet and seized. The threat is clear: do business with Venezuela and you could lose your ship. It's a powerful deterrent, reshaping global oil trade. Seizing foreign ships in international waters raises thorny legal questions. Freedom of navigation is a core principle of maritime law, one the U.S. has long defended. Critics now accuse the U.S. of undermining that very rule. The skipper, linked to Iran, was on a sanctions list, making its seizure more defensible. But the Centuries wasn't, and the U.S. is using a novel argument. It's part of a shadow fleet aiding a narco-terrorist regime. Many legal experts warn this sets a dangerous precedent. If the U.S. can do this, so can China, Russia, or Iran, potentially leading to chaos at sea. Recent U.S. actions, including deadly strikes on suspected smugglers, add to concerns about overreach. The world is left asking, who decides what's legal on the high seas? The answer could reshape global order. Every U.S. boarding of a tanker risks disaster. Crews may resist or panic, and a single misstep could spark violence, or even war if Venezuela intervenes. The Caribbean could quickly become a battleground. There's also a looming environmental threat. These tankers carry millions of barrels of oil. An accident, fire, or explosion could trigger a catastrophic spill, devastating marine life and coastlines for decades. The region's economies, built on tourism and fishing, would be crippled. Cleanup would cost billions, and some damage might never be undone. The Shadow Fleet's old, poorly maintained ships are especially risky. Forceful boardings only increase the danger. The U.S. believes these operations are necessary, but it's a massive gamble. One mistake could mean environmental and human catastrophe. The stakes for the Caribbean's people and ecosystems couldn't be higher. The world is watching, hoping disaster can be avoided. But the risk grows with every operation. The U.S. isn't just testing its naval power, it's testing its global credibility. By seizing ships in international waters, the U.S. risks appearing above the law it claims to uphold. In Latin America, memories of U.S. intervention run deep, fueling distrust. Even countries that oppose Maduro are wary of U.S. military might in their backyard. Brazil has warned that escalation could trigger a humanitarian crisis. The precedent is dangerous. If the U.S. can seize ships, why not China in the South China Sea? Or Russia in the Baltic? The world could become a place where might makes right at sea. The U.S. must weigh its goals against the risks, conflict, environmental disaster, and eroding the legal order. The Trump administration believes the stakes justify the means, but the world is watching. America's reputation and the region's stability hang in the balance.